and it's to do with Android. If we look at the users that have Android on their phone now, it's I think it's pretty safe to say, without being blasé, it's a very mainstream platform now. You've got users that have got no idea about operating systems, no idea about platforms, in fact, no idea about smartphones, but yet they're using Android and are very happy with it and can see it as a unique product compared to, say, the iPhone, and there's some identity there. In the midst of all this popularity and Android having so much good praise and popularity is increasing all the time, I think we had figures cited last show of about 200,000 activations a day, allegedly.
About 400, I think.
400 was it? Right?
Don't quote me on that too much. I think it used to be 3. Okay, the numbers I remember from about half a year ago was Apple talking about just over 200,000. Which is roughly the number of applications they also have in the shops now, in the shop that they run. And Android was talking about activations, and I think they said, I think it was 300,000 a day. Now it's 400,000 a day. Okay, so I'm not sure what it means in terms of sales, but it's almost more than Apple's.
Because, I mean, I could be misinterpreting it, but I understood an activation to be when somebody physically gets hold of the phone, switches it on with their service provider, whichever they've chosen, or carrier, and then is then registered, and that was classed as an activation. That's what I thought an activation was.
Upgrade as well. So if you get your phone and you refresh the thing, you have to reactivate.
I mean, the question I had, regardless of whatever figure is the true figure, I think it's safe to say that Android is horrendously popular. And what I can't understand now is, why aren't we seeing, instead of having all these new ideas, Google having all these new ideas about the Chrome operating system, why aren't we seeing just, and I hate to say this, copying or emulating, but why not go down the same route as the Windows platform where they have Windows Mobile? So we have Android Mobile, and then why isn't there an Android desktop? I mean, we've now established that Linux is viable for any user. It's generically usable for anybody. So why aren't we seeing Android being being produced as a desktop?
Else. Well, you have a series. Google has more than just the Android trademark. Of course, used to be a very disputed thing. They got sued and so on. But now Apple owns the trademark Android. It's a very powerful brand because people go and ask for a phone. People say Android, and say, "Oh, Android, that's wonderful." Anyway, so Google has Chrome, okay, and that's a trademark as well. And they have Chrome OS. Chrome OS is just more of a wrapper to Chrome. So they say, well, we've got the browser. It connects to this service, that service, and we also need some housing for the browser, something to kind of bring it to people, to put it on a laptop, to package Chrome with services, things like YouTube and they don't create many successful products like in general. But they try to use the browser as a way of selling advertisements to users in all sorts of ways, not just through the browser. And what they said most recently was that the vision they had was that Chrome OS is going to be for just about anything that doesn't have touchscreens, and Android is going to have touchscreens. Now, of course, from a design point of view, that's a really, really poor thing to do. To say, well, if I want to, touchscreen, let's just do a whole new code base and just fork the whole thing instead of just making this an option. Of course, the reason you have this one single Linux and you have branches of Linux is because you don't really want to maintain 2 code bases or 2 projects and 2 teams working on something which overlaps. And one going back about a year, I think it was Sergey Brin who said that the company was intended at some stage to merge the platforms or to offer. I think the idea of convergence was never quite reached. They cannot even make Android work too well with Linux upstream. They've been talking about this also for almost a year. Linux developers are not so happy with what Google is doing because they make life quite miserable in some ways. They don't actually work with the other teams as well as they could have, and I think Google was hiring 2 more developers to work just in the kernel and trying to improve the relationships between these projects. So going back to the point, I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing that they have the different operating systems like that. I think they also have a fragmentation here in terms of identities and brands. So people say, oh, what is this Chrome thing? What is Android? If you look back and you think, what is Skin anyway? Is it like Windows? Does it run Windows binaries? What does it do? Like, what is it like Windows? Does it feel like Windows? And people don't really know. It's just some name, which sounds kind of like, kid or Kinder. It's kind of German for kid, and for kids, and then you have the company basically failing with it, and then they tried to adopt two things, and one of them was Windows. The second thing is 7. So everything from Microsoft is now 7. They always try to use the 7 because they want people to have the connotation with, I call it Vista 7, they call it Windows 7, and it's just Vista, and it's a bit more of a, it's just improving the existing things, and maybe it works for some people. From what I can tell, it's just, and from what I've seen, it's just like Vista, and it's got fewer bugs perhaps, and some people are happier to use that. So with Android, they deal with something that's barely being sold. Do you know of any Android laptop or any Chrome OS laptop being sold? They used to give bloggers quite a few of these. They distributed to people experimenting with things.
I mean, the closest thing that I got to Android on a netbook, it was the Jolly Cloud that I tried when I reviewed a few lightweight distros for the netbook, and I settled on a different one. And I think Jolly Cloud was the most. It looked very similar to an Android type user interface. The power and the icons, etc. There's about as similar as I can get, and I wasn't very favourable about that. And funnily enough, I've got a little bit of feedback to give at the end about Jolly Cloud and my views on that. But no, I haven't seen or personally had hands-on with any device running that. So sorry, Roy, I interrupted you there anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't quite like what Google's trying to do with both platforms. I'm not unhappy about it. I'm not alone in this, by the way. If you look around and you speak to a person who's been promoting Linux for a while, they kind of think it's really nice if we have a Linux running device, which is also open, because of course, just because something runs Windows doesn't mean the layer above that is going to be free software. So you can have things like WebOS from Palm, where almost everything is proprietary. Even the applications tend to be proprietary, and then they have Linux in the heart of it. So you can say, oh, wait, it's Linux, so okay. And they don't actually contribute, as far as I can tell, they didn't really contribute much to Linux anyway. They were just using that in the same way that TomTom was using the kernel and picking some old version of the now, when it comes to Chrome OS, they make it a lot worse, considering what they could actually achieve with these things, because they don't allow you to install an operating system of choice quite so well. They do, I understand, have some switch that allows you to go into what's called developer mode, but I'm not sure if it's going to allow you to get access to all kinds of applications and functionalities of the laptop. So they kind of say, well, you can do your own thing with it, but we're not going to help you do that.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when they sell you a computer with Windows, and they say, well, you could delete that and put things on it, but you've already paid for something else, and we're not going to give you support if you have any issues with it. Or we won't even fix your keyboard if you put Linux on it. In the case of PC World in the UK, they have these really crazy excuses where they could actually try to justify it. When you send us a faulty computer, we like run some diagnosis tools, and if you put Linux on it, we won't fix your hardware issues either. So,
funnily enough, I was actually on the phone to PC World today. When the press release we talked about earlier with the £98 PC was misreported on the radio show that I heard, and it was misreported as being in partnership with PC World. So I rang up the head office and I rang up customer services, and unsurprisingly, nobody had a clue what I was asking about because it was misrepresented on the local radio station. But the one thing on the automated line that did make me chuckle was it advertises a health checkup, in which it refers to obviously a Windows machine, and there's a plethora